So I'm going to be arguing against Zach's negative arguments against my workability and disadvantages of my policy. And one thing that he mentioned was that the president actually has a right to send unmanned aircraft or even manned aircraft as long as there's an imminent threat present for U.S. citizens. The problem with that is that we don't really know how do we police that. Anything could be an imminent threat. Everything's so vague that we can't do anything about that. If there's no conversation with Congress, and which is essentially an extension of ourselves, because they're our chosen representatives, maybe that would open up some kind of dialogue, and maybe they could question them about those imminent threats and see how valid those are. That's the problem. They say that he actually has those powers under our Constitution. However, it's so vague and it's mostly carried out by clandestine agencies like the CIA that we have no idea how to even approach that subject. So we need more transparency through our proposed policy change. Another thing was that in terms of disadvantages of my policy, he claimed that that they're cheaper and safer for ground troops or for U.S. troops, so it's actually better for us. And because of that, it just wouldn't work because Americans essentially wouldn't support it. But I don't think that justifies civilian killings. According to a study done called a metadata study of drone strike casualties, between 8 to 17% of all people killed in drone strikes are civilians. According to 130 interviews with victims and witnesses of drone strikes by researchers from Stanford and New York University, people who live in these areas experience harm beyond death and physical injury. And here drones hover 24 hours a day. The problem is we are negatively affected because these people are perceiving the U.S. as being a terrible country. And eventually that will actually cause possibly more terrorist acts against the U.S. According to Madiha Afzal, PhD, and professor of public policy at the University of Maryland, there's a growing anti-Americanism in the parts of Europe and Pakistan from the use of drones in areas where war is not declared. What bothers this group of intellectuals in India, about U.S. drone strikes more than any attack on Pakistan's sovereignty is the perceived American hypocrisy toward the importance of Pakistani lives and deaths. Following the horrific shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in December, a piece in the UK newspaper, The Guardian, titled, In the U.S., mass child killings are tragedies. In Pakistan, mere blood splats, went viral among educated Pakistanis and Europeans. That's affecting us. It might be safer and cheaper for us, but it's still affecting us. In terms of cheaper, they are very inefficient though. According to NYU School of Law, an article published from that school, drones killed very high-value targets with very few high-value targets with alleged leadership roles in the Al-Qaeda or anti-US Taliban factions. Reuters reported that 500 militants the CIA believed it had killed with drones between 2000 and 2010, only 14 were top-tier militants. So does that justify the cheapness? I don't think so because of its inefficiency.